Welcome live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you very much for tuning in. You, of course, are watching the week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Let's take a look at some of your headlines, perhaps before we get into the top stories for the week ahead. Well, Basic Education Minister Andrew Motshekga has announced that all learners will make a full return to school with effect from tomorrow. Johannesburg Power Utility City Power says it's lost millions of rands as a result of the rolling blackouts over the last week. In sporting action, it's a big one this evening. Senegal, of course, taking on Egypt in the AFCON 2021 final in Cameroon. Right, those will look at your headlines. Of course, we're going to get into your top stories for today. We've seen that the big focus this week will be on President Cyril Ramaphosa this coming Thursday, the 10th of February, as he delivers his State of the Nation address at the Cape Town City Hall. As we know, just before we get into that, another top story making headlines, Basic Education Minister Andrew Motshekga announcing that all learners will be making a full return to school with effect from tomorrow. She's made the announcement in a media briefing in Pretoria. Now, most schools, excluding the majority of former Model C schools, have been conducting rotational learning. This is because of the adherence to the 1 meter social distancing requirement in the classroom during the coronavirus pandemic. Motshekga says that they have made the necessary adjustments to welcome learners back to full-time learning.
We have agreed that full-time attendance starts tomorrow, Monday, the 7th of February, 2022. As a sector, we remain mindful of the fact that COVID-19 is still with us. All of us have direct responsibility to ensure that we prevent the spread of this virus and its variants. Medical science has informed the decision that had been taken in the past, and as a sector, we continue to follow advice and guidance from public health experts. On Friday, the 4th of February, 2022, the Council of Education Ministers convened to consider the state of readiness for the full return of learners, and we are confident that schools are ready for the new norm. Even yesterday, on Saturday, we did meet with teacher unions again to assess the state of readiness and report to them on the matters that they had raised with us during the course of the week. So in preparation for the return of all schools to daily attendance, provinces have made preparations around the following important areas. First, we had to communicate with parents to ensure and make sure that they understand or they really get ready for the fact that full schooling is resuming. We have adjusted the school timetable. We have adjusted our school assessment programs. All matters relating to assessments and curriculum have been attended to. We have looked at how we really are managing the environment now with the new norm, strengthening our non-pharmaceutical preventions, accelerating and working on infrastructure, as I've reported earlier, continue with the provision of transport because now all learners are coming back on a daily basis. The continued provision of school nutrition, intensified monitoring and oversight, and also looking at the curriculum recovery plans, because as you may appreciate that almost from more than 2 years, we just never had normal schooling. So the return to normal timetabling will assist the sector to intensify its implementation of the recovery plan. The learning losses incurred in the past 2 years are indisputably devastating. At the basic education level, last week, we resolved that the sector will need to be rebooted, recalibrated, and repositioned to withstand the debilitating impact of COVID-19 and any other pandemic or life-threatening challenge that we may face. In the first step towards addressing the crisis of learning losses is to prevent further disruptions in schools and prevent other learning losses when ensuing the health and safety in our schools. The second step will be to introduce measures to catch up on the time lost as well as the teaching time lost. We urge parents and all our stakeholders in the sector to support efforts to ensure that education continues without any further delay. So last week, we did convene our 7th Basic Education Lekgotla, and our theme was equipping learners with knowledge and skills for a changing world in the context of COVID-19. And this Lekgotla anchored its presentations, deliberations, and debates on a number of items, but particularly also in this Lekgotla, we were inspired by national and international experience and innovative practices that were shared by many speakers on highlighting the importance of the Lekgotla theme and the different objectives that we had. Amongst others, we did discuss at length the impact of COVID-19 in education and health, monitoring learning and COVID-19 context, perspectives of learning recovery in the African context, and learner assessment under COVID-19 context. We also took a look around teachers as leading change agents in building a resilient education system, and also shared perspectives and views and the importance of ECD for future learning outcomes.
Right now, in other news for the week ahead, of course, all eyes will be on President Cyril Ramaphosa this coming Thursday as he delivers his State of the Nation address at Cape Town City Hall. This will be the first time since the dawn of democracy that SONA will not be held in the National Assembly chamber. It comes after the chamber totally collapsed last month when the National Assembly building, of course, caught fire. The Cape Town City Hall will also be utilised for the SONA debate come the following week. President Ramaphosa were to approve the Judicial Service Commission's recommendation for Supreme Court of Appeal President Mandisa Maya to become South Africa's Chief Justice before Thursday. She could in fact lead the procession of the judiciary during SONA. But as we know, SONA is the only annual event which brings all three arms of the state under one roof. But perhaps to unpack the significance and what we can expect on the week ahead, we are joined by political analyst Professor Barry Hanyani from the Northwest University. Prof, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here today.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to your viewers.
Prof, perhaps before we get into the conversation, obviously just want to take a look at the overview of the State of the Nation address to date. We've seen President Cyril Ramaphosa will be delivering the 6th SONA address to the nation, to the sitting of the National Assembly, and of course the National Council of Provinces come Thursday, the 10th of February at 7 p.m. And obviously also looking at the significance of the State of the Nation address, we've also seen that President Cyril Ramaphosa will have everybody watching to see what he's going to be addressing, seeing that the joint sitting of the two houses of Parliament and the traditional, and this obviously traditionally marking the opening of Parliament for the year, setting the tone and the agenda. I wonder, Prof, on the back of that as we reflect on the myriad of issues facing South Africa, it's obviously going to be a historic moment given that it's going to be held at the City Hall rather than the Parliament, obviously due to the fire that broke out earlier this year. But when we look at the significance of the State of the Nation address and also after the fact that it follows the January 8th statement, which also set the tone of the year for the party at large, are we expecting an inspiring enough address come the 10th of February? And also when we look at perhaps it might be one of his toughest yet, what are your thoughts?
Well, it most certainly will be one of his toughest. And I wouldn't like to go as far as linking the ANC's January 8th statement with SONA. ANC is somewhat obviously geared towards what the majority party would want to see, notwithstanding the nature and amount of problems that as a party they're experiencing. But here lies a platform which then seeks to unite and advance a very much so patriotic position that says it's the general will that is at stake here, regardless of ideology, regardless of political affiliation, which in turn puts pressure on the president to say, he stands for everybody. His government or administration must work for everyone. And that's a tall order to ask, given the circumstances in which we find ourselves. For starters, he will be in a foreign space, so to speak, and I'm using that as a metaphor to reflect the incident of the burning of Parliament, which we're so accustomed to. You can understand the amount of rituals that are done each time SONA is observed, your gun salute, the pomp and ceremony that is attached to the SONA itself, the meet and greet atmosphere, albeit under COVID-19 circumstances. So all of that would be replaced by this uncertainty, by this aura of not being in the common space. And so the question beckons, will the president then deliver a message of hope that will then take us away from that quagmire and instill a sense of purpose that despite all these hiccups, the nation is still intact. We are safe, right? Safe being the operative word here, given the fact that these parliamentarians will be away from their usual safety net, which is Parliament. So he's got his work cut out, really. And then to deal with the agenda of the day, the issue of the economy, the issue of COVID, South Africa's role in the global space, but reminding us that we are fresh from local government elections, expectations out there are high. His own political party did not do well. Despite all of that, there is this commitment nationally that things have to change. Issues of service delivery, issues of good governance, especially in municipalities, may very well be touched on. As usual, the issue of the economy, he might not want to go into details awaiting end of the month with the budget speech. We look forward to that to say, will the nation be able to raise the level of expectation with regards to foreign investments and, of course, encouraging domestic investment in the process. The issue of unemployment, I think it's at the heart of the economic troubles that we face. Then somewhere in the corner of the speech, are we likely to see acceleration of government reforms? Somehow he has not done well on that front. Remember, ever since he came in, there was a call to say, can we see a reduction in state institutions and thereby driving ourselves towards saving the coffers of the nation in terms of oiling the government machinery. So these and perhaps other pointers will, for me, become the core of the focus of SONA this year.
Prof, thank you so much for setting that preview for us. And obviously, as you've alluded to, there's a myriad of issues that will need to be reflected this time around. I wonder, as we take a look back at the previous SONA in 2021, I mean, we've obviously seen that the president, focused on overarching themes, including COVID-19 and vaccinations. We saw economic recovery sentiments coming through. Again, the issues of job creation and corruption at large. Now, with the president using this address to announce, new, perhaps even visionary programs and projects to perhaps set for this year, perhaps as we also reflect on some of the accomplishments that happened in the previous year on the social, political and economic front. Again, with the myriad of issues coming through this time round, petrol prices increasing, unemployment, inequality, poverty, amongst many others, what interventions are going to be needed? I think as we start off, perhaps the issue of SOEs comes to the fore. We're looking at from governance to leadership issues at large, and also state-owned institutions. What needs to be tackled first as he, focuses on that theme this time around on Thursday?
Lizel, I wish there was the first, the second, and the last. I'm afraid it's the matter of dealing with concurrency. Any thought that drives this government and its administration away from that would mean more time, and time is not on our side. As the administration tackles the issue of unemployment, there's immediately the issue of the youth unemployment. Then, of course, there's the emerging issue of illegal immigration and the kinds of social justice issues that are attached to that, which also includes access to economic activities and opportunities. So all these myriad of issues cannot be tackled somewhat in isolation from each other. It's a question of sitting down and say, on the level of concurrency, rightly so, priority may very well lie on the issue of economic recovery, but out of that comes then the imperatives of responding to the challenge of poverty. And somewhere in between that, there's the issue of now sitting down and say, as a president, I've asked for 4 months to respond to the demands of the state capture report on issues of corruption. Here lies a window of opportunity to say the state is serious about dealing with corruption, including, by the way, disciplining those members who belong to the majority party without fear or favor. So this SONA must also give us a light that says, definitely now that the tide has shifted, and at the helm of that, the president is willing to pull the bull by its horns and say he will lead in the front in terms of the anti-corruption fight. And even if it involves those who are very close to him, some kind of steps will then have to be taken against such individuals. So that tone needs to come out very strongly this time to say, as a nation, we are serious to fight corruption, and as a nation, we are serious to embrace development going forward.
The issue of economic recovery also comes to the fore. We've seen high numbers of unemployment, particularly amongst the youth, limited job opportunities also. I mean, we've also seen graduates who remain unemployed. And I wonder if we also look at how, during the January 8th statement, the president, alluded to the fact that young people need to be afforded opportunities to play a more significant role within leadership and occupy key positions of leadership as well. I mean, how is this also going to come across, particularly as this is the future labor force of the country?
Yeah. Well, the Minister of Finance will have to tackle this one, I'm afraid. He may have the liberty as a president to labor on the rhetoric that was said on the January 8th statement, which sadly it's a waste of time and energy. It's high time that these experiences, the January 8th statement, SONA, work towards at least giving us a bit of substance. I'm afraid on both accounts, we cannot afford to labor on less substance, less facts, and without at least giving indications that there are indeed plans aloof to try and redress, to try and confront some of these social, political, and perhaps economic challenges that this country faces. I think as an administration, they have to admit the criticism that they have fallen short of being in the forefront of giving us the scientific value, approaches, modalities, instruments, which are then designed to garner in the confidence that the nation needs, that here lies an administration with solutions. As things stand, I'm afraid, we can no longer afford to hear promises without substance and real commitment to certain goals and objectives by government.
Solutions, trust, credibility, some of the key catchphrases that come through. But I think another issue that definitely has come to the fore is the country's security issues. Following the July unrest, perhaps also some isolated sporadic incidences to date, including the way, New Year kicked off with the setting ablaze of Parliament building in Cape Town. Obviously, as we understand, these are national key points. So the spotlight on the capability of our security cluster at large is also going to come to the fore. Perhaps how government understands what is happening, perhaps even providing the necessary assurance for the nation at large. How do you think this is also going to impact or be reflected on in the speech, if any?
I'm afraid he will have to admit that mistakes were made, especially in July last year. Some incidences could have been avoided. The intelligence community could have been forewarned and in return provided much needed information which could have prevented some of the incidences from taking place. So from a distance, one can assume that our security cluster, including the intelligence, are not in good shape. And what is the way forward? Once again, it cannot escape the issue of government reform. It cannot escape the issue of demanding some measure of accountability. The issue of transparency when it comes to issues of intelligence, it's a tad bit sensitive, but we need the assurance that internally we are safe. What has happened in Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado, with Al-Shabaab operating there, will it visit us as South Africans? Are we safe from such possible incursion? These are issues that are at the center of the national security issues. But also internally, could there be an emerging force that we are unaware of that would want to destabilize the way in which this administration is working? What are the countermeasures against that, if any? So these are the issues that I'm afraid SONA, the speech itself, must then give us a light as to how much commitment is placed by government on the table.
And perhaps as we wrap up the focus on SONA, I mean, the issue of policy incoherence as well in terms of development and implementation, and even the communication thereof as a united vision around some of the policy positions also seems to need to come to the fore, Prof?
No, absolutely. Certainly, it exposes the element of not only individual ideologies of our senior members, both in the majority party as well as in government. If you go back to July last year, I think that was one of the suitable theaters which expose these kinds of indifferences. Others are thinking this is some kind of a revolution in the making, if you put it that way. Others saw the whole incident as nothing short of criminality. So it is those varying degrees of interpretation of reality that tells us that perhaps unity amongst these leaders is something that is far-fetched. And until such time that they get to see and share perhaps the same worldview, we should then have the confidence in our hearts that says the vision, the approach, and of course, the attitude towards government-related matters is something that is equally shared. It's a process. It's not going to be resolved at a go. And I think it's reflective of the kinds of political dynamics that are taking place within the majority party itself.
Well, absolutely, Prof. Thank you so much for echoing those sentiments. I think just in the interest of time, as we move into another story, perhaps as we take a look at the week ahead, I mean, there's been some criticisms following the interview processes undertaken by the JSC for the 4 candidates. This, of course, upon the announcement of SCA President Maya, who's come out as the recommended Chief Justice candidate. What are your observations, perhaps also in terms of the processes for the President from here into after these recommendations? What are we set to witness going forward?
Well, the pros and cons can obviously be observed from the entire process. From the pros side, obviously, look, our democracy seems to be in good hands, one would argue. Processes are transparent. We are demanding accountability. And if you go back to this whole immediate experience, we had 4 best candidates that, as jurists, the country could offer. And yes, it divided the nation, unfortunately. A whole host of us would look at the 2 front runners, the acting Chief Justice Zondo, Dustin as well, as persons who are likely to take the baton. But then the JSC had a different opinion altogether. They looked at President Meyer to say, look, you've done a sterling job in Bloemfontein, the Supreme Court of Appeal. You've presented your candidacy quite well. Although we've got to be careful, questions about her gender and how she navigates the struggles associated, obviously, with her position, it's something that is natural. We shouldn't read too much into it. And I'm happy she clarified that herself. We're interested in the merits. What has she done? Can she handle the pressure associated with the new position as advanced by the commission before the president would approve it? So these are things that obviously occupied the public debate. Going forward, we wait for the final approval by the president. If she does ascend to that throne, may she lead the judiciary in a way that is able to withstand criticism, but more so it's able to institute the kinds of reforms that were spoken about, not only by her, but the other competitors as well, so that we build a much stronger judiciary system, which by now we accept was the last frontier from relegating this nation and state into a pariah state altogether.
Prof, let's leave that conversation there. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for obviously taking a look at some of the stories that we can look forward to on the week ahead. Again, Professor Barry Hanyani from the Northwest University, political analyst. Has officially handed over the African Union chairmanship to his Senegalese counterpart, Macky Sall. Under Ramaphosa's leadership, a number of initiatives were undertaken to address the COVID-19 pandemic, and obviously included the establishment of the AU COVID-19 Response Fund, the African Task Force for Coronavirus, the partnership to accelerate COVID-19 testing in Africa, and we also heard about the consortium for COVID-19 clinical vaccine trials. Now, Ramaphosa made the handover during the opening session of the AU's 34th Ordinary Session of the Assembly. And that's where we're going to leave it for you today. It's been an absolute pleasure as always from myself, Liesl Wilson, and the rest of the Week Ahead team. Until next time, do take care. It's goodbye for now.